Messieurs, mesdames, je dois commencer avec un mea culpa. Je ne peux pas parler français assez bien pour continuer dans cette manière pour plus qu'un ou deux phrases. Dans une minute, je vais parler en anglais, une langue assez plus confortable pour moi. Mais je vous assure que s'il y aura une opportunité, je mets quelques mots en français de temps en temps. That's by way of preface to saying that when Jean Malaquais and I were contemplating this show, we did a little arithmetic and we realized that not only were we each the oldest friend alive for the other, but that we had known each other for 47 years. Since Jean Malaquais is 86 and I am 71, our combined age is 157 years, which would take us back to the era of Louis Philippe.
When I first met Norman Mailer back in 1947, he was on a GI Bill studying at the Sorbonne with his young wife, Bee. He was very charming. He was about 24 years old, very timid, had good manners, and I liked him very much from the very beginning. And he was eager, very eager to learn what I didn't know. He was then at the Wallace movement, and he was politically extremely naive. His education was typically American, and we somehow became friends.
Jean and I have not only been friends for 47 years, and not only love each other dearly, but we have never agreed on anything, or almost never agreed on anything at all. He is an old goat. He refers everything to surplus value. He is the last living Marxist. He is also a man to whom I have an enormous debt. I could say that I've probably learned more from him than from anyone I know. You cannot talk about anything. You could not talk about this tablecloth or this studio or the weather without Jean being able to fit it into his worldview. He's virtually the last of a species, and as you will see, we will argue back and forth and get nowhere, but we'll have a fine time doing it. Thank you.
When we first met in Paris back in 1947, I remember that you were saying that you wanted to become a literary hero. What do you mean by hero?
Well, a hero, I think most people have a general notion of a hero. A hero is someone who does exceptional, is exceptionally brave and commits unheard of acts and succeeds and changes the history of whatever he or she is doing. But I was thinking of it more as a literary hero. I had literary heroes. When I was in college, I wanted to be, I don't mean this indiscriminately, but I had huge respect. I wanted to be like Hemingway, like
yes.
Faulkner, like Dos Passos, the American heroes I had, like Malraux, who impressed me immensely, Man's Fate, Man's Hope. I was not alone in this. We all, writing was very, very important to us in those years, those of us who were young writers. We wished to, we had the belief, today I call it the conceit, that we could change the nature of American life. And what's happened that I find sad is that none of us ended as heroes. We ended up as celebrities in America. So that most people know us, but they know us only because there's television.
But why did you want to become a hero and a celebrity? Why, instead of trying to be just a good writer?
Because I'm an American. In Europe, there's a tradition that you become a good writer, and that's sufficient. But in America, you always have to be larger than life.
And larger. You see, a hero in French, which means a héros.
Yes.
And several heroes, you see. If I may make a pun, I would say about several heroes, les zéros.
Oh, well, that's you. That's you. You say les zéros, but
Wait.
to a lot of people, a hero still has a meaning.
Not les héros, but les zéros.
I get it. I get the pun, but I'm not amused.
You see, I have no respect for this kind of desire to be on the first page, up on the first one on stage, you know, be a hero, be a celebrity.
Well, you're saying that you have no interest in vanity.
It's vanity, naturally it's vanity.
Vanity is a baggage that you carry. People who have a large vanity are carrying a very heavy suitcase, whether they realize it or not. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the desire one has to change history, to affect history.
Yeah, well, it's history who makes the individual. The individual doesn't make the history.
Well, I don't agree. I think that what we have is that history generally forms individuals, but occasionally you get an individual who has who has an effect back upon history. I don't think France would be the same today if there had not been Charles de Gaulle.
Norman, what do you mean by celebrity? I would posit that a celebrity is just a commodity. It sells well on television.
Well, that's part of it, but there's also a mystique to celebrity, which is that the average, Andy Warhol once said that everybody in America will sooner or later be famous for 15 minutes. And it's almost as if that's a rite of passage for people. You know, they want to get to the point where they're famous, even if it is only for 15 minutes. It's part of what's, I don't think it's a particularly agreeable aspect in my country, but it is absolutely true that this mystique of celebrity is far more important than you give it credit for being. You just say it's a commodity and that's the end of it.
But I mean, you know, you just become a killer, you become a celebrity. You make a hit on Wall Street and you become a celebrity.
Well, there was a movie by Oliver Stone called Natural Born Killers, which says just that these serial killers become celebrities.
Yeah.
But, no, there are other celebrities. Jackie Kennedy, Onassis was a celebrity. In fact, I learned what celebrity was once I happened to be standing next to her at some event or whatever. Let me finish.
Yeah.
And people started to take pictures of us, and I felt as if I were facing machine guns. I mean, I've had a picture or two taken of me in my time, but this was extraordinary. There were hundreds of flashbulbs going off, and I felt as if I was being blinded. And I turned to her and I said, I guess that's why all we celebrities are so stupid. It's because we're blinded by the flashlights.
I could make a kind of a statement. I would say that being a celebrity is your infantile malady.
And I would say that your insistence on keeping to a point that has no particular relevance to a discussion is your premature senility. In a certain sense, there are no heroes left in American life. There are only celebrities, and they immediately are transferred to television. You can almost say that when a small person becomes a celebrity for 15 or 20 minutes, they can measure the fact they become a celebrity because they're immediately put on television. And there's an odd business going on in American life, which is that while on the one hand, as life in America becomes more and more violent for a minority of people, a very small group of people, the majority of people become more and more passive. And they watch this gory parade and this march of luminaries, new people, new celebrities on television with a passivity that's unparalleled in American life. And television has become, you might say, more important in America than money or love or family or war. Television has become, or the church, or the churches. Television has become the very center of American existence.
It is because television is an extraordinary tool to de-celebrate people.
I would agree.
You would agree about that?
We agree.
Yeah. I believe that you wrote the most blooded pages about television. I would agree with whatever you said about television, and still you go on television. So you participate in this de-celebration of people.
Well, let's get to that by degrees, because that's a large idea. I'd rather say that I think that, television is often blamed for the increasing violence in American life. But by the way, I want to insist on something, which is it's not only increasing violence in little violent groups all over the country, white and black both. But but there's an increasing passivity in American life as well. The passivity goes to such extremes that people no longer have good memories in America. Nobody can remember anything any longer. But I think the two are a related phenomenon because, as you say, children watch television for many, many hours every day. And I think that the violence that comes is not from the violence that they see, because that violence is a little bizarre for them. They don't, you know, it's not real violence. It's a spectacle. It's an entertainment. The real violence comes from the fact that they're constantly being interrupted by commercials. To me, every time you're following something on television and giving it your attention, and in America we have commercials every 7 or 12 minutes. It isn't like it is here where a great many shows are protected from commercials. In America, the commercial goes on and on and on. It interrupts everything. And the result is that from a very early age, children do not form the habit of concentrating. On the contrary, they expect to be interrupted, and because they have that expectation, they do not have concentration. But on top of that, the interruption creates a violence in people. We all dislike being interrupted. But when it's done systematically, it's what I would call a coitus interruptus of the brain.
Speaking about violence, in England, just 2 boys murdered, killed a 2-year child. In France, it just happened also the same thing. They murdered 2 little boys, killed a little girl. Where do they take that from, if not from the violence on television?
Violent people are people who very often find it very difficult to concentrate. Because when we cannot concentrate, we become more and more frazzled, irritable, edgy. Now, when you have a strong young man who has a violent streak in him, and he's in that state of being edgy, he'll be violent before he even knows it. Now, you can point to these children being killed by these British adolescents and blame the television series they see and stuff like that. But in fact, nobody ever sees adults killing children on television. That's one of the taboos for a very good reason. It could be said that television has become that lens which distorts all reality to fit its needs. Another way you could put it is that television is now a valve, and large events and small events go through this valve and are reduced or enlarged to the same size. So that there's an enormous change in values is going on with television. It's ubiquitous. It's replacing money in a certain sense as that common denominator for all existence. And you said a little earlier that, why do I go on television? You know, if I'm so opposed to television. And the answer is that it's the only game in town. There are times when you really feel that the only way you can express yourself is through television, even though you know every pitfall with it, every hazard, everything that's disagreeable about television. It's a highly improper and imperfect way of expressing oneself seriously, but sometimes it is the only way.
But television distorts, even if you address certain questions in your own way. They distorted. It's unchristian, it's untrue. It is such a distorting thing, as I said before, it is de-celebrating. It's making people into, I don't know, into a commodity, into a tool. They are not capable of thinking of anything. They look at it.
I will say one thing. It reduces the amount of time that people will give to answering a question. You know, you could say of certain people they can't bear any question that takes longer than 10 seconds to answer. Well, with television, you can get to the point where all of humanity won't be able to bear any question that takes longer than 2 or 3 seconds to answer.
In television, the suffix is a vision. In pornography, the suffix is graphic. It's the same thing. And both of them aim at not seeing anything, but being fed. When I was young, a girl would show her knees. It would be extremely exciting. Today, a girl would walk in miniskirts and show her pussy, and it's completely indifferent to me.
Really?
Completely indifferent. I mean, it's not exciting, like just seeing a girl leaving a car and showing her the beginning of her thighs. And pornography, again, became a kind of a poison. They are selling pornographic films by loads to people who cannot make love any longer in bed without looking at a pornographic picture.
How do you know all that?
How do I know?
Yeah. Have you been watching them?
Because I am so intelligent that I know that.
You're taking your intellectual tank and you're riding the treads over a very delicate subject.
What is so delicate about pornography?
Well, the question is whether pornography serves a useful or an ugly function. You know, you could say that in a certain sense all television is pornographic in that we are able to study people doing things that are not necessarily comfortable for them, and we can study them at our ease. Pornography enables us to study the sexual act in others and to form some conclusions about our own sex. Let me ask you, do you ever watch pornography?
No, I never watched. I remember once.
But you speak authoritatively about it without ever watching it.
No. Look. Everybody knows what pornography is, and generally, you need pornography because you are, in fact, impotent.
Well, I'm not impotent, not yet.
I'm not speaking about you. I mean, generally speaking.
No, but I think you're making a large assumption. I have a joke I make often, which is if pornography had been around when I was a young man, I would not have gotten married 6 times. I was an innocent, you see. And so each woman I met was a great discovery to me, and I would get married. I got married many too many times early in ways I wouldn't have if I'd known more about pornography. In other words, pornography gave me a certain sophistication when it arrived. Now, the ugly side of pornography is the one that the women would bring in.
Look, why do you say it made you sophisticated? Don Juan never looked at a movie, a pornographic movie, and he was the greatest lover in the world.
Yes, but he was unique, number one, and two, I was not Don Juan. Don Juan was a phenomenon. Don Juan was a sexual hero. He was a sexual athlete.
And then it is leading toward violence, toward sexual violence.
I believe that pornography probably prevents as much sexual violence as it creates. I think there's certain people who see pornography and become sexually violent as a result, a small minority. And there's also a small minority of people who are appeased by the pornography and become less sexually violent. And there's a huge middle, it's a bell-shaped curve. There's a huge middle that is titillated by the pornography, and occasionally, if they have a philosophical bent, they understand a little more about human nature.
Let's talk about women.
About feminism. Yeah. Feminism is very interested in pornography negatively. They feel that women are abused and that it's a terribly ugly process.
Aren't they?
Yes, the women are abused and the men are abused, and they're both doing it to make a buck. And so, to use your favorite word, they become commodities. And there is something disagreeable about the process, no question. But you know, it's also very disagreeable when cattle are killed in order to provide us with meat. And we don't think twice about it. I don't know if you've ever seen cattle being killed.
Yeah, I saw. Well,
you saw
Chicago, yeah.
And you still eat meat from time to time, no? You're not a vegetarian. So as I say, very often there are terribly ugly acts going on in society that we nonetheless accept because we need the use that comes out of the activity. And when it comes to feminism, of course, there are many more important ways to discuss feminism than pornography. I mean, I find feminism an absolutely fascinating phenomenon because I half agree with it and I half disagree with it.
Now, what do you call feminism?
I'm not arguing that women don't have the right to emancipation. What I'm saying is that there are leaders of the women's movement, feminist leaders, they're intellectuals, are a group that remind me of nothing so much as the first sour batch of Bolsheviks under Stalin, in that they are programmatic, ideological to the extreme where they no longer see the human beings involved or the human questions involved. And if they ever gain power, I think a great many men would be gone, they'd be off the face of the earth. Because recognize one thing, Jean, there's one reason why men are terrified of feminism. Do you know what it is?
What is it? Tell me.
It's that, well, if the men killed all the women on Earth,
yes,
you see, but saved just 100 for procreation, the race would die. You see, but if the women killed all but 100 super studs on Earth and milked them every day and kept the semen in banks, they could keep the race going.
Yes.
So in other words, what men feel is women can virtually exterminate them and keep the race going.
And you once wrote about the American dream.
An American dream.
Wait, an American dream. that you were the only writer alive who could have a character who killed his wife from the very beginning, in the first chapter. Remember that?
Of course.
Yeah, you wrote that. Why?
I have two interesting characters, and I kill one of them off. So I said, I'm the only writer in America who would ever have dared to do that. But it was in the form of a jest. You know, part of the trouble I get into all the time, and I'm now discovering to my horror, Jean, that this is true with you too, is I say things in jest with irony. I'm mocking myself a little, and it's always taken literally. I mean, people are stupid.
Killing one's lover, one's wife, because he was in love with his wife. Roger.
He got into a terrible temper and he killed her.
This is the most extreme way of possessing a human being, to kill him. A human being you love. Then he's forever yours.
Well, if you believe that, then you have to believe in a hereafter. Because otherwise there's no possession at all. If someone dies and you possess them forever and they are nothing but dust, all you possess is dust. So you have to believe that they have a spirit that endures after death.
No.
Well, let me finish the thought. And that's the only way you can possess them. Actually, I think your remark, forgive me, but I think your remark is full of kvatch. Not that you kill someone and then possess them. This is very French, Jean. To kill someone is to possess them.
Let it be very French. But the idea is that if you kill somebody out of love, you won't possess it exclusively for yourself. That's how
it sounds like Dracula.
No, it has nothing to do with dust, with corpse, with anything like that. It's a way of possessing, to murder somebody whom you love. Then nobody.
I guarantee you, if I loved so much, I would never kill them. I would never even hurt them.
Yes, so you kill them by proxy. You kill them
Listen,
by.
Let me tell you a story.
Let
me tell you a story to show you how far I've gotten from the days when I wrote An American Dream.
Yeah.
I'm married to a woman who I consider lovely, and I adore her, and we've been married for 20 years, close to 20 years, 18, 19 years.
Don't tell me
we've been
who it
together.
is.
And what happened is one time she cleaned the house completely, and I happened to come home, and just before I came home, it so happened that 3 suits had come from the cleaners, and they were laid on the bed. She laid them on the bed, and then I opened the door, and I come in. I don't notice that the house is clean. All I see are my 3 suits on the bed, and I turn to her and I say, can't you even hang up my suits? And at that point, she socked me, big girl, she socked me right in the kitchen, hard enough so that I was bleeding. What do you think I did? I leaned against the wall, and I prayed. I said, God, give me the strength not to hurt that beautiful woman's face. And I stay there, and I prayed for 5 minutes to have that strength. And then I pulled back. God had given me the strength. That's my understanding of love at this point. It's quite different from any understanding I had 30 years ago and more.
Yes, you were afraid because you were afraid to kill her.
For a long time, I've said for many years, and I've learned this to a degree from you, that the violence of the individual, you would not agree with this, but it came out of your thinking. The violence of the individual, in my mind, is not opposed to the violence of the state, but it is opposite in nature. In other words, very often states that have relatively very little crime and very little violence on the streets often become highly totalitarian. Two examples I would give was Nazi Germany and Russia under Stalin. The Russians always had this huge detestation of hooliganism. They did not permit crime on the streets. There was, under communism, there was never a country where it was safer to walk the streets at night than the Soviet Union, and yet there was a huge oppression.
No, on the totalitarian states, all individual expressions were strangled, were kept down, and among them, violence.
Yes.
Violence became entirely the monopoly of the state.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So that state violence that goes on, they just murder people by scores, you know. And it's not in Iraq now. And tomorrow, if it's necessary, all over the place. For instance,
well, you're talking about war. I'm talking about the violence of the state. In other words, to me, the violence of the state is not so much going to war. That's a form of the violence of the state. But the real form, because all states go to war sooner or later and often enough. Yeah. But the real form of violence, to me, the violence of the state, is when you have gulags and concentration camps, and when you have in effect a portion of the population that's kept under prison control for reasons that are larger reasons than crime.
But in a country like France, in a country like America, for instance, there are no gulags. But look at the cops. Look at their violence. This is state violence.
There is absolute excessive violence in all sorts of places all over the world all the time, committed by the police. But I don't think that's the center of the argument. What I mean is that if we're going to talk about the violence of the state, you're talking in a certain sense about local violence. A good policeman, in my mind, is the most difficult person to become. A good police, you've heard me say this and you hate me saying it, but I will tell you, I think a responsible policeman
Excuse me, there's
is
no
a work
such
of,
a thing as a
let
good
me finish
policeman.
the thought. A good policeman is a work of art. There are very few works of art on a police force. Most policemen tend to be corrupt. There's a lot in the nature of it that brings out the worst in people.
But what do you mean by a good policeman?
Is a work of art. A good policeman is one who is responsible to his job, does not abuse the power he has, and if he has to exercise violence, as will happen upon occasion, is incredibly responsible and has even, and this is not uncommon among certain policemen, even has a certain compassion for the criminal that he captures and arrests.
You are a romantic when you speak about
No, I'm not.
policemen.
No, I'm
You are
not.
romantic.
There are policemen like
In
that.
fact, they never work in singles. There are always 2 or 3 of them.
Well, you
and
speak
all the three
always,
cannot
always.
be-
Do you know that there are large arguments in New York about whether policemen should walk a beat alone or walk in 2, and a great many places you have policemen alone. And it's considered, in fact, more dangerous when you have one policeman alone
Yeah, because he's
for
afraid.
the civilians.
Because he's afraid.
Well, of course, of course. If you're in a tough neighborhood and you're all alone,
No, but they are cowards. They are cowards.
Hey,
they are
I got
grown
news
up
for you. I got
with
news for you.
pistols and
brave soldiers are cowards. Everybody's a coward.
No.
Everybody's a coward before violence.
No, not
Violence is a place where you can get killed. There are very few, anybody who's brave all the time in violence is not afraid of death for perhaps the wrong reason.
What about the black people? The police is sitting on their back. For instance, in the United States.
Listen, you're talking like this, but to me, the situation is much more dangerous than that. You know, there's an enormous drug problem, not only in America, but all over the world, but particularly in America. It has reached such proportions of intensity. You know, for example, in Los Angeles, you now have what they call drive-by shootings, where you have people who are so insane on drugs that they'll go by and they'll kill some stranger in a car who's they're next to. It's what Andre Gide, I believe, used to call l'acte gratuit, but he was using it for a robbery, for a caper, for something amusing. Now it's getting absolutely deadly. People in Los Angeles are afraid to drive their cars. Let me go on. The drug problem is immense. If it is not solved, it's going to drive America into fascism, I believe, because most Americans by now, out of fear and out of the need to keep simple answers for complex questions, have equated the blacks to drugs.
So would you, for instance, infer from there that the extreme right favorizes drugs in order to be able to take power later?
Well, they would never agree to that formulation.
No, but would you...
You could say,
objectively
I think you
speaking-
could say that objectively speaking,
Yeah.
the drug problem is very much to the advantage of the far right in America,
Look.
because they capitalize on people's fear and detestation of the drug problem.
Now, if you imagine a situation where all those black people and the Mexican, Hispanics and things like that, most of the people, those who take the drugs, who are the poor people.
It's largely a matter of the environment, but no one's going to be able to deal with the drug problem until they understand that the drug problem came into being because people's lives were profoundly unsatisfactory.
That's right.
Not just at the economic level, at the spiritual level as well. Jean, when people take drugs, it doesn't change their personal economy unless they go out and start robbing people, at which point they have more money than they ever had before and very quickly end up in jail because they're amateurs at it. The reason people take drugs is because it gives them a rich inner life. I mean, I can tell you, I had about 5 years where I used to take marijuana a great deal. Gave me an extraordinary inner life. I don't take it anymore because I simply can't afford it. That is, I can afford it economically, but I cannot afford it in terms of what it does to me. It uses up my best sources of material as a writer.
There are times where you said exactly the contrary, that you, on the drugs, you were losing your mind and your capacities and everything, your inner life. You were saying that, and this was also true. No, the problem is not there.
The point is, the drug problem can always be solved very simply, which is you go into a highly dynamic and highly enforced police state. This is the terrible alternative that's facing people now. There are a lot of people in America now who secretly would rather have a form of totalitarianism in America than put up with a life where they're afraid of drugs, afraid of crime, afraid to walk the streets. This is what's driving America to the right. That's why the far right in America is prospering.
But look, those people are poor yokels.
Why don't you face into the real difficulty? The real difficulty is that America is moving to the right now, and there's very little to stop it because of the terror of the drug situation.
Now, Norman, you said that America is the last beast. What is, from your point of view, you being an American intellectual, what is the role of an intellectual in the American reality now?
It's dispiriting, to say the least, that among us, there's not that feeling that some of us had 30 and 40 years ago that we can make a difference. I'd still like to think we can, but as a practical matter, you have to recognize, even if you're a romantic, as you call me, that the chances are getting smaller and smaller. There's a process going on now that dictates political and intellectual influence in the country. And a lot of it comes from television. In other words, the people who speak on television every night, Ted Koppel, people of that sort, they, you might say, have a certain intellectual influence. Although since they're very much of the middle, the influence goes a little to one side and a little to the other. Any kind of profound change in America that's going to take place will take place, I think, through the revelations, unfortunately, of cataclysms and convulsions. I don't see intellectuals having a large influence on America at this point. However, it's not entirely hopeless. You know, there is a certain, any kind of, here we're part company, but any kind of capitalism that functions at all, in my mind, has to have a highly developed and intelligent establishment with all the divisions within such an establishment. In other words, an establishment of the left and an establishment of the right that conduct certain kinds of arguments where they recognize that some of the more extreme horrors of capitalism can simply not be exercised. I mean, part of the irony of the last couple of years has been the way everyone in America was clapping their hands and saying, now Russia's got a free market and they're going to solve all their problems. Well, that was idiocy. I mean, they're capitalists, but they don't understand that for capitalism to function reasonably well, it has to have not only a free market, that's just one aspect of capitalism, it has to have powerful institutions and a powerful and highly intelligent establishment in order to function at all well.
Look, but there was a time when the intellectuals were in the, so to speak, in an opposition, in an ideological opposition. Some of them were revolutionaries. All of them, and you included, sold out.
We didn't sell out.
You sold out. You
sold out to what? To who?
To the establishment. You belong to the establishment. It's not only your case, but all in France, all the former extreme leftists, the Maoists, all of them became the pillars of the society.
Well, I would hardly call myself a pillar of American society. I mean, to this day, I'm seen in America as a bizarre figure who doesn't fit categories comfortably. But when you say I sold out, you know, that's personally very insulting. I could say you sold out by being relatively inactive all these years and never doing anything except complain. But I'm not going to get into this.
No, but
saying sold out is about the most insulting single thing you can say to someone.
But I wanted it to be insulting. I wanted it to
all right. If you want to be insulting, then I will just say to you that, in my mind, you have sold out as much as I have.
No, I did not. Because
if we're going to get into that, for a very simple reason, which is you've been inactive. You have not used your intelligence. You've not used your powers. You've not joined any battles. And a lot of us are just shell-shocked from battles.
I haven't joined. If I don't write anymore and things like that, I do write, but I don't publish. I don't want to publish. I haven't joined. I consider myself one of the very few alive intellectuals who did not join. All of them have joined, and you included.
Well, we joined what we consider a battle. Now, to you, the battle's not pure enough, so you won't fight. Well, there's such a thing as never finding a battle is good enough to enter, which is what you've done. Never was there a battle that you could join with any pleasure or any feeling this was the honest battle, this was the true battle. Battles are highly imperfect. When you get into them, you fight beside people you don't even like. You end up with compromises that are not satisfactory.
No, you compromised. There was a time you were an idealist. There was a time even you would remember.
There was a time when I was your disciple, so obviously, from your point of view, I was purer then than I am now.
Now you became an orphan.
An orphan.
You are no longer my disciple.
Well, being an intellectual orphan is not disagreeable. We were talking about totalitarianism. And of course, everybody who talks about that sooner or later comes into the idea that that the CIA and the KGB both had a great deal to do with it. There's a certain popular association, I think, between spying and totalitarianism. Perhaps it'd be better put if I said a certain association between the Cold War and spying. People say if you're taking them both away, what difference would it have made? Wouldn't we have come to the same end? And the argument can be made, I think, because you could say that that at a certain point the United States decided to defeat the Soviet Union by spending a lot of money in an arms race. In other words, accelerating the pace of the arms race until the Russians went bankrupt. And I think that was true to a degree, and I think it even be said that without the CIA and the KGB, you would have had an end to the Cold War and very much the same history, that they neutralized one another. But in fact, I think they also served huge social purposes in each country. Not attractive social purposes, but large ones. It's impossible to conceive of the Soviet Union without the KGB.
What about the United States?
In America, it was subtler because it was one of many more factors. But there was a feeling among many people, myself included, way back in the old days, by the old days I mean the 50s and the 60s and even the 70s, that the CIA was an enormously powerful organization that was taking over America. Looking back on it now, since I've written this book, Harlot's Ghost, I've come to recognize the CIA was not quite that powerful. And in fact, they often felt weak and powerless. Indeed, looking back on it, I would say that the irony is that the CIA ended up serving as an arm of American propaganda rather than as an intelligence agency.
So it's nothing new about it. What is new about it is I have the feeling that you are idealizing them. Huh?
What, in my book?
Yeah, I read it in the New York Times in your own words because it's a quotation. You were for what you call the wet job, which means you were for the killing of the ones by the others.
I'll tell you simply that I think that if there had been the capacity to kill Saddam Hussein instead of killing 10,000 Iraqi soldiers, I would have been all for that, wouldn't you?
No.
If you could make a choice between Saddam Hussein dead and 10,000 Iraqi soldiers dead, which would you choose?
But this
As
is
a
not,
hypothetical...
But this is not the problem, Norman. This is not the problem. It depends who kills whom. I would kill Saddam, but I wouldn't let the American spies, the American imperialism, kill Saddam, because they are exactly the same swine, the one and the others, in my conception. I don't choose between the devil and the son of the devil, or the cousin of the devil.
Well, I know there's another point of view that says when devils are killing devils.
What do you mean? Where is the difference between being extremely dangerous and evil? Where is the difference? Where do you make the difference?
When you're dangerous, you're not necessarily certain that you know where you're going with that dangerous quality. Someone who's evil knows what the good is and proceeds to eliminate it.
No.
No. Stalin was evil. Hitler was evil. Saddam Hussein, I believe, is evil. They know what's better, and they don't do it.
And Reagan was an incomplete, literally speaking, an idiot.
Who?
Was not evil. Reagan. Huh?
He wasn't too bright.
Huh? He wasn't too bad.
No, too bright. No, he wasn't.
He wasn't too bright, yes. And still he was evil to an incredible degree.
Well, but one could tell that America was entering upon a very bad time by precisely the fact that they welcomed Reagan, that they loved everything he had to say. He was our Pied Piper. I mean, he kept saying absolutely ridiculous things to Americans, like, I'm going to beef up our military and reduce our taxes.
Yes.
Well, you know, even an 8-year-old can make that.
No, because all of them lie like that. You know, they lie. And a true liar is the one who believes in own lies. He lies so much that he becomes himself an embodied lie. He believed it. He was an nincompoop. He was he had the intelligence of a 10-year-old boy. And this was the...
He had something better than that. What he had was cant. In other words, he believed whatever it was necessary to believe. You know that word, cant?
What?
Cant. C-A-N-T. Not I cannot.
No, I don't know.
All right, anyway, he believed what he wanted to believe. And he had very powerful people around him who loved what he had to say. But in fact, a tremendous lie was exercised upon the American people during that period. which is that the Soviet Union was the evil empire.
No, it's like your people over there when they say in that book, "I hate communism." They don't even have to spell the word communism. They don't know anything about communism. What a communist idea, what the kind of ideal, it right or false, true or false. They didn't have the slightest idea, but they had that hatred in them, you know. And America was the paradise on earth.
Well, the point is, America has always been essentially a warlike country, number one. Number two, so long as we had the Soviet Union as an enemy, Americans were relatively happy because all their anger could be channeled in one direction.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons America's in terrible trouble now is because the Cold War has ended. And in the course of the Cold War ending, it's as if a great switch has been thrown on the electromagnet that kept all the filings in place. Now, when the switch was thrown out, all the filings go in every which direction, and any number of hatreds that used to be directed toward the Soviet Union and were manipulated by the power at the top.
Manipulated, yeah.
Now, absolutely manipulated, now go in all directions. So that everybody in America is now beginning to hate everyone else in America. I can never remember a period in these last 50 or 60 years of my political consciousness when as many people hated as many people in America.
So why do you defend a system which breeds such hatred among its own citizens?
I promise you, I don't defend this system. It happens to be the only system around at the moment. I think, you know, as far as I'm concerned, capitalism begins in crime and it ends in crime, which is why the Soviet Union is having such a hell of a, the ex-Soviet Union is having such a hell of a time right now, because they're beginning in crime, precisely as capitalism begins. It begins by acquisition and plunder and thievery and so forth. But the point is that there are two kinds of capitalism, and until I see something that's better that I can believe in, I have to hope that in preference to a world that's absolutely destroyed and torn apart, I'd rather that capitalism, such as it is, and it's more than imperfect, it's semi-hideous, nonetheless it succeeds in blundering through. It's the only beast we have.
America is the power in the world today. So the Chinese have the atom bomb, the French have the atom bomb, the English and the Israeli and things like that. But America is reigning all over the world now. What will become? What, in your perspective, what will be the issue of that?
Well, I feel there is a battle that one can join and fight in, which is highly imperfect and most disagreeable, but nonetheless it's the only battle we have at this point in America. I'm terribly afraid of America becoming a fascistic nation. The scenario I'd give you is, so long as we don't have a serious depression in America, then we're probably all right. But if we do have a serious depression,
yes,
then as I see it, there's going to be trouble in the ghettos. And when there's trouble in the ghettos, because at that point, the terror about crime will increase if there's a serious depression, since particularly the underclasses will have fewer jobs and so forth. And when crime increases in a depression at that point, there'll be a real push to defeat crime by opening up, the prisons are all filled, opening up barbed wire encampments. And once those barbed wire encampments are opened, what you're going to have next is a certain pinching and compression of the press.
So America will become a country of concentration camps.
Well, how long does it take before an ideology... You see, in this case, most totalitarianisms up to now have come with the ideology first, and the society followed it one way or another. Or there was an ideology and it got perverted, and then you had your totalitarianism. Here, the totalitarianism will come first, and the ideology will follow it.
Totalitarian society means militarizing the country. Against whom?
Against the huge prison populations there'll be. In other words, the form the militarization might take immediately is you might have soldiers who would be patrolling the barbed wire encampments, because there aren't enough good prison personnel from the point of view of the establishment to take care of these camps.
Yesterday the enemy was Russia, and today the enemy is within.
Yes, yes.
The enemy is within.
We're in agreement.
Well, it's a suicidal enterprise. It's a suicidal
I'd say a fratricidal
outcome.
A fratricidal enterprise.
Oh, yes.